Have you ever wondered whether the problems in the world today would exist if we had deeper connection to ourselves, others, and the environment, and acted from that place?
Welcome to the Conscious Action Podcast with your hosts Brian Berneman and Kayla Greenville, who believe that connection is the key to taking conscious action as individuals and creating a better world.
We are here to raise awareness and inspire meaningful action by sharing stories, knowledge, and conversations with thought leaders and change makers.
From sustainability to well-being and everything related to conscious living, our mission is to empower you to be the change that you want to see in the world. Welcome everyone to a new episode of the Conscious Action Podcast. I am Brian Berneman, your host, and for this episode I have the pleasure to be joined all the way from Canada by Kristen Manieri. And Kristen, thanks first of all for taking the time to be here. I love the fact that we're in different parts of the world and we're able to connect in this way and to be able to share these wonderful conversations. But first of all, for everyone listening, who is Kristen?
Oh my goodness. That could become a really, really deep question. But I think in terms of the person that I'm moving around the world as, I have been writing about and coaching about and really reflecting on conscious living for the last 20 years, but really more intensely or intentionally over the last 5 or 6 years. And just asking myself on an ongoing basis, what it means to live a conscious and connected and intentional life. And so while I'm certified as a mindfulness teacher, I am always so iffy on using that phrase because I think it's a word that gets used over and over, mindfulness. And what I really mean by that is conscious and intentional, like being aware and awake in my life as much as possible. And so that's what I do. I write about that. I coach on that. I teach courses on that. And it weaves its way into almost every aspect of my life. So that's who Kristen is, I guess, for now.
And wonderful. And I do want to get to a few of the things that you just mentioned, but you just mentioned that for quite a while in your life, you've been taking part on this and exploring this. What led you to that?
Oh, I can tell you the exact, not necessarily moment, but season in my life. I was in my mid-20s. I had started working for a motivational speaker. Was absolutely a fork in the road. I don't think that we have many of those. I think we have a lot of forks in the road, which makes it difficult for us to make decisions and why our lives can feel so overwhelming and stressful at times when we're faced with decisions. But I think most of the time it's going to work out one way or the other. But that moment in my life feels really pivotal, that up until that point when I met Richard and his wife, Sue, that I really was just living by whatever happens, like whatever the weather was just sort of what shaped my day and my life. And when I met them, Richard and Sue, I realized, or I started to learn that no, we design our lives, that we actually bring an intention and a deliberateness to the way that we live, and that actually changes the results that we get. It doesn't mean that bad things don't happen or things that we didn't see coming, don't happen. And look at the last almost 2 years of our lives. Certainly we cannot predict and control everything. But what I do think is that when we do the work to get our minds straight, steady, then we have a tremendous amount of say over our experiences, our relationships, even how we experience our experiences, which is, I think, 90% of the secret sauce, honestly. So yeah, it was definitely 2004, summer of 2004, meeting them. And that just set me off a path of just being not only awakened to the possibility of personal growth, but actually so incredibly passionate about it that I really veered my life in that direction going forward.
That's so beautiful. And I think it's really interesting how a lot of times we have this tendency of needing to see and to be modeled by someone or some people how things are possible, because we all have, and this is my belief, and this has been not only my beliefs but also what I have learned through years of working with a lot of people, is that we all have that capability, we all have that inside of us, yet we haven't been awakened to that possibility. And therefore, a lot of people tend to just go through life, as you were saying, just going with whatever life is throwing at you, which is perfectly okay. Yet, the moment that, for whatever reason, we get that spark and something awakens, and we can see that we can take agency and we can take responsibility for our experience, that is powerful.
I think people more and more, and I know I'm painting with a really big brush right now, but just if we were looking at statistically the number of podcasts that there are and the number of listeners of podcasts, some of the data that's coming out about the millions and millions and millions of downloads. And I know some of those podcasts are sort of jokes, or they're about sports or beer or whatever. I'm not saying all podcasts are about the conversation that we're going to have today and that you have on your podcast all the time. But there is a lot of very deep and introspective and insightful and wise content in podcasts, and people are consuming it at huge rates. And to me, so that points to me like we are becoming more and more attuned to being a more reflective species, really asking ourselves, not only what does this all mean, some of those bigger questions, why am I here? What is my purpose? But even just on a more micro level of, who do I want to be in my relationships? Like, how do I want to show up in them? And what do I want to create in my life? Or why is it that I don't seem to get what it is that I want to create in my life? And realizing that a lot of these answers happen in community, whether it's listening to a podcast and just hearing another person's perspective, or joining a coaching group, or, whatever that looks like. When we hear people's experiences of growth and evolution and their journey reflected back to us, it causes something, it stirs something. And so I think that it's important that we continue to create spaces for us to be able to not only do our work, but share the doing of our work, this journey that we're all on.
Definitely. And I think that is so important in terms of the difference that I see on the times that we're in now, just generally, that potentially 50 years ago or hundreds of years ago, the work was much more individual, and now the work is individual and collective. It's in that space as well that a lot of the work gets done. And I always believe that what I'm doing for myself and the work that I'm doing in healing myself, that is healing the collective as well, because we're all interconnected. So that is such an important aspect of these times that we're in now, especially because there is so many different kind of experiences. We all experience life differently, yet we all think that somehow we are kind of living the same type of life. And also, there is so many different aspects that create level of separation. And for me, that is part of the human experience. Yet, how can I be with all of that? And I think that is really, really important in terms of being able to develop more understanding. And I want to ask in terms of that, one of the things that you said that for me really resonates is mindfulness. you said, like you're a trained mindfulness facilitator, yet you prefer sometimes to, far as I understand, to not use that word in that setting. Can you expand a little bit more on that? Because I think that I know where you're going with that, but I would love to hear a little bit more.
I guess I'm just cautious of words that assume that everyone knows what we're talking about. So meditation is one of those words. It's amazing how often I'll get into a conversation with someone about meditation and what they'll say on their side. Just literally had this conversation in the last 24 hours. Some version of, I'm not doing it right because I'm not able to quiet my mind, or some version of that. And what I find so interesting about that is that to me, it's like embedded in the word mind or meditation is this mistaken identity of like, it's supposed to mean that we like our thoughts just disappear. And so as a result, when people, quote unquote, meditate, they often will almost always have the experience of doing it wrong. Because if that's the intent, is to make our thoughts disappear, then, and that what neuroscience can tell us is that's virtually impossible, then it would always feel like you're doing meditation wrong. Whereas if I just stop calling it meditation and I call it sitting with your thoughts or observing your thoughts or observing your mind or just steadying your mind, now you're going to have a totally different experience of what I just said, even though to me, that's what meditation is. So to go back to your question, I'm careful, I'm cautious around words that are sort of loaded with assumptions, especially when they're wrong assumptions or unhelpful assumptions. And I think mindfulness is another one of those. Like we think of it like a trait, like you got it and I didn't, or, you seem to have more of it than me, when really it's a state that we enter into and maybe for fleeting seconds or moments, and then we're back into the automated part of our mind. And so there's this pressure that goes along with mindfulness, like it's like this new character trait or personality trait that I'm supposed to have. And again, I just think that's an unhelpful assumption around that word. So I would rather say things like aware and intentional and deliberate and present, because those words, at least in my experience, don't come loaded with this expectation, this misguided expectation that I'm always supposed to be a certain way, which I don't know about you, but I haven't figured out a way to be mindful 100% of the time. And I don't think I ever will. My mind is not designed to be that way. So, and I certainly don't live in a culture that supports me being that way 100% of the time. So yeah, I think that's why I create that differentiation when I talk about what it is that I do.
Yeah. And I think that for me, language, it's really interesting because of that. And a lot of my work, I'm always really careful as much as I can in understanding who I'm talking to understand whether I use a word like mindfulness or meditation, or if instead of that, because they might have a bias or a judgment or an assumption about it, if I go directly to say, let's be present, let's connect, let's slow down. Whatever, as you're saying, awareness also sometimes, awareness and consciousness, sometimes for some people as well, there are so many assumptions. So a lot of times it's for me finding what's the right word or what's the right key that it's going to unlock that door so that someone can be. And that is really challenging as you're saying, in this fast-paced society, having that capacity to be with what is. and to be able to not judge. For me, the mind is incredible. And as you're saying, a lot of people think that meditation, it's all about quieting the mind. And yes, there's an aspect of that. That is not all of it. And whenever I'm sharing some practices, I keep on telling people 90% of the time, especially when someone starts, 90% of the time or even more, is catching yourself going on some thoughts and like going on whatever like stories they are creating in their heads, and then it's like, oh, I'm supposed to be here following my breath or whatever specific practice they are doing, and not judging and not thinking that is wrong, I'm doing it wrong. I had many times people said to me in the last 10 years either that they can't do yoga or they can't meditate, and I always said, okay, let's back down. What do you mean by that? Like, what does it mean you can't do yoga or you can't meditate? Like, do you mean, are you not flexible? That's not yoga. Are you thinking? That's not meditating. How we connect with that is really interesting, and I do really like and I think that from what you're saying, this connected, deliberate, intentional, that is really important, because for me, what that brings is that brings us to the place where we actually take agency for our life. We are no longer victims of our circumstances. We are taking control as much as we can of our experience, and to be able to create enough awareness to see like, oh, this is happening, this is challenging, but what's my experience within that? And understanding in relationship to others how they can see things from another lens, another perspective. And instead of me judging or defending a position, how can I try and see things from their lens? And I think that this is really interesting in a space where I'm seeing more of what I've seen referred as McMindfulness, this this commercialization and capitalist movement of these practices that are making it even more challenging. And yes, it's amazing that this is happening and this is scaling all of these practices, but as well as creating a lot of issues with that.
I love what I've been tuning into, and what you're saying is that like how important and magical language is. And what it had me thinking about was that often in our journey, like whatever each person's evolution looks like, whether it's sort of happening to them or they have a sense of agency around it, and it's sort of like a self-started, like I'm ready to grow. It has to start with, and this is just my opinion, this languaging. And that could look like talking to a teacher or a coach or a therapist and like just taking what's in here and like putting words to it. Or that could look like journaling. That's another loaded word, right? Where people are like, what is journaling? And like, I'll just simplify it. It's like putting language to how you feel and what you're thinking. And I kind of circle or I'm kind of underlining or highlighting this whole concept of language as such a critical part of our growth and our process of just processing and understanding what it is that we are doing and what we're experiencing. But I emphasize it because different people are going to have different language, and it's going to resonate with different people. You know, if you and I were to walk into our local bookstore, there'd be dozens, maybe hundreds, depending on how big the bookstore is, books on personal growth. And you think, oh my gosh, like how many universal truths could there be? Why would we need so many of these books? And there really aren't that many universal truths. Like I'm sure you and I could distill it down to, I don't know, a dozen. And they weave their way into almost every single one of these books. And being a podcast host, as you are too, I read an incredible amount of books on personal development and self-awareness. And there's the themes are very similar. But when it comes to language, I could read book A that's talking about meaning and purpose and discovering who I am, and it could completely fall flat on me. Or I could read book B and be absolutely blown away. Like it could blow my mind. And it all comes down to language. Like it's just, whether it's a podcast you're listening to, or whether it's a book that you're reading, or a guru that you're following, it resonates because somehow this person or this author or this speaker or this host has extracted or excavated the language that actually makes whatever that is makes sense to you. And so I bring that up because I think it's important when people are on their journey is just keep opening doors. Like if something doesn't resonate with you, then next, try the next thing and see if that resonates until the language feels like, oh, that is right. That feels true to me. And it's not going to be a one-time, one-shop deal. It's going to be a search, and it's going to be a distilling down. And then eventually you'll have your own language and your own truth and your own words. And what you write in your journal is what's true for you. And I had a podcast guest that I was speaking to says you go from having a guru to having a yuru. Now you have tapped into an really intuitive, deep wisdom of what's true and what's right. And I think that's just such a cool part of the journey. Is like, we're all on it. And many of us are saying different things, but we're really not, it's pretty universal.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I want to say a couple of things on that in my experience, I grew up speaking 3 languages, and then I learned a few other languages, and knowing different languages has made I think that my mind quite malleable, but as well it has made me appreciate certain aspects of life in a different lens than someone that perhaps doesn't have that. And as an example, there was some of the practices that I was doing. So I for a big part of my life, I've been following Tibetan Buddhist teachings. I started to learn the Tibetan language. The reason why I did that was because all of the teachings that I was reading were either in English or in Spanish. And I thought, there's another level here of something that I'm not getting. And once I started to read some of the teachings in Tibetan, I was like, like something clicked, because there wasn't that same filter to look at it from. And a word that I was using, I was like, like in English, for example, saying Buddha, like that can have lots of different ideas and interpretations in my mind. Whereas if I use the word in Tibetan, Sangye, that is a very different meaning. There's a different explanation. There's a different feeling to that word. And I think that is really important in the way that language can be really useful, and as well can be in the way. And we need to find a way to resonate with things. And I do think that this is one of the reasons why a lot of times, even though I have heard from many people that I shouldn't be doing this, I don't ever feel like I'm competing with anyone in this space, because someone will resonate with me, someone will resonate with you, someone will resonate with someone else. And we all will need, as you were saying with the books, the same. Like we all resonate at different times in our life with different things. And by trusting that is the best thing that we can do. And what I want to ask you now is, in terms of that, how does, in your experience, someone find how they resonate with things? Because for me, we have been living mostly in the Western world in our heads. And for me, that resonating comes from the body.
I love that. Yes, because you're 100% right. I think the first thing that I've learned over the last year, and it just so happens that I seem to have been interviewing a lot of people who write about intuition and inner wisdom. And so I've learned a lot more about it in the last little while than I have probably in my lifetime. But one of the things that I've picked up and really got solidified through a good friend of mine, we speak every single week, is that yes, we do feel resonance in our body, but we usually feel it in a very specific place. So some people might feel it in their throats or in their chest or, in their lungs, like in their breathing, or it might be in their solar plexus, or it might be in their stomach, or it might be in their, in their shoulders. But most of us can close our eyes and actually feel when we actually feel something that's intuitive, where that actually lives. And I think it's really important to figure out your own mechanism, like where you actually tap into it. Because when you notice, oh yeah, I do, for me, it's in my solar plexus. That's where I feel it. Like, and it kind of like starts there and then kind of just goes woof, like up through my rib cage. When I know that that's where I go to find it, first of all, I acknowledge its existence and I kind of honor that is so for me, but also I can evoke it, like not like fake it, but like I can turn the volume up for it. So it's, I don't have to strain so hard to listen. Like, am I a yes for this or am I a no? Like, am I feeling this person or am I not feeling this person? Should I sign up for this course or should I not sign up for this course? I can almost I'm doing it with my head, like lean an ear in, like, okay, what is my inner knowing telling me here? And so I think that's a big part of resonance. And I am totally a walking head at times. Like I live a lot in my mind. Being in my body takes a real deliberateness to me. I don't go there first. If someone asks me how I feel, I will tell them how I think about how I feel, or I will describe how, what's going on in my life and what I'm thinking about it. But I don't go right to like, well, how I feel is I'm aching or I feel wounded, or it's taken some coaching and some real like intentional embodiment work that I'm still on that journey to realize that from here down has a say too. And not only a say, but has something really valuable and important to say, maybe even more so than what's happening from here up. Because here up is where all my beliefs are and my conditioning and everything that happened before, and my amygdala that's just wanting me to survive and all of that. Like that's what's all in here. But like all of the wisdom is below my chin. And so it's a great question, because I think that we're missing embodiment work in our teaching of our humans, whether it's kids or teens or whatever. It's missing, and we need it. I really feel that.
Yeah, it's interesting because for me, a lot of my personal work started with embodiment work, started with reconnecting with that aspect that I had ignored for so long, that it was I was the same. I was living in my head, and the capacity to return to my body and to tap into the wisdom of my body. But as well, something that I do believe that is interesting is when a lot of times we want to come back to the body, that doesn't negate the head. I think that I was actually teaching recently a session on mind in meditation, because we vilify it. We want to sometimes get out of it, and as we were saying at the beginning, people think that it's about quieting it down, we have the capacity to use our vessel, our body, including our mind and our mental capacity, to as well tap into what I would say energy in the universe and the ideas that are floating around and are everywhere, both within and without, and the capacity to be able to tap into things and being able to explore them from a feeling sensation, senses sensations, mind capacity, that whole realization of how we can experience that, for me, is the ultimate way that we can holistically understand how we experience life. Because as I come to my body, that doesn't mean no more head. That just means understanding this is all connected. How is that in relationship, so that I can then show up and I can then respond to life in the way that at this moment I know or want to, or try to explore. And that, I think that it's really important as we do personal work, how we engage with all of us.
Mm-hmm. Oh gosh, what I love about that teaching is how it points to the way we can wield our mind like as a tool, that it's actually this machine that we use. And yet I think when we're not aware, it's what uses us. And I can think of just an example of that today, of feeling like my doubting mind, my self-judging mind, the one that wants to protect me from failure and embarrassment, or, all of the above, really kicked in today. And it just my thoughts just started really running, like the motor of like, you can't do this. What were you thinking? Turned on. And then, I felt tired. My body started to feel really constrained. And it wasn't until actually I met my husband in the kitchen. We were just sort of ships passing in the kitchen for lunch today. And he said, "How are you doing?" And I shared that with him. Like, I'm just like, oh, I'm in such a funk today and feeling like I can't do this. But just saying that, like actually declaring it, and then coming upstairs and just like honoring that was there for me today, that energy was there, that those thoughts were there, reminded me that, oh, that was just like a tape that got turned on. And when I actually sort of grabbed the wheel again, it was like, sorry about that. When I, like a runaway horses kind of thing, like, and I dropped the reins, but when I grabbed them again, then I can steer the mind again. And I can think true thoughts. I'm not going to fake it, but I can think thoughts like, you will figure this out. You usually do. Like, things do usually feel impossible at first. It is not unnatural for you to feel doubt right now. You've never done that thing before. And you are uncomfortable having these conversations. That, enrolling people into a new experience does feel uncomfortable. It's okay that you feel this way. And it's just cool to be talking to you about it, because you're presencing me to a process that, while was done with a certain level of consciousness of me sort of taking control of my thinking, I really actually wasn't even that aware that I had done it. But this is you said, like, the magic and magnificence of our mind. Like, this is what we can do. Like, we don't have to be a runaway train all the time. And I've spent a lot of time being a runaway train. I still do become a runaway train. And yet I am so aware of my capacity and my agency to be able to grab the reins of my thinking and, pull back on them and go, whoa, 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 I don't want to go there. And that's not me pretending or, making up stories about my life. Like, I'm still rooted in reality, but we're always interpreting our experience. And we can do that with love and compassion and with hope and care and gratefulness and all of those things.
Yes, and I think it's really important a lot of times to recognize that capacity that we have and the importance of acknowledging what is. A lot of times, and when I work a lot of times with energy blockages or trauma, it's about the capacity to acknowledge them, perhaps to voice them as you were just sharing, and that takes the the hold that that has on us, because we are allowing it. It doesn't need to be denied. I think a lot of times I see people trying to use affirmation, things like that, kind of like that faking till you make it. And a lot of times for me that feels a little bit tricky, because no, it's not about faking it. It's about, okay, feel it, experience it, process it, integrate it, and then that's it. And as you were saying, it's so important to understand, I and each of us, we have the capacity at any point to become more present and to take responsibility and to say, actually, I'm going to stop and I'm going to change gears, and I'm going to, as you were saying, take the reins again, and I'm going to choose more consciously what I want to do. That doesn't mean that that didn't happen. That doesn't mean that that's gone. I still need to perhaps work through it. Yet, at each point in time, we have the capacity to do something. And I think that for me is really powerful, because that means that we all can do that at any point. And it doesn't matter what we have done during the day or the week or a month. The moment that we catch ourselves, okay, this is new, I can choose. And I think that is really, really important to understand, as you were saying, that we have that capacity. And when we catch ourselves, it's much easier. And I want to ask you, Kristen, when you have been doing this for a while, for people that are just starting and that they want to catch themselves, what would you recommend in terms of some easy practices or easy things that they can do during their days as they start to develop more and more of this?
I think that when you and I talk about this ability to kind of stop the runaway train of our minds, and, having had lots of these types of conversations and practiced this and taught this, that I think it's easy for me to forget, at least, that there's actually tools that we use that usher in or shepherd us to clear states of mind where we can access our calmer, steadier, more discerning selves. So to answer that question, I think we all know that there's things we can do that have us slow down. For some people, many people, it's going outside, it's going for a walk, it's getting movement, actually physically, like moving the body. And so you can go from a very upset and intense mental space and knowing, like, okay, I'm just going to go for a walk around the block, and seeing, like, okay, I start to feel ease. I start to, I feel like I can slow down the horses a little bit. For some people, it might be talking, like actually calling a friend and saying, I'm going through a thought tornado right now. I need some help. It could be journaling. It could be writing that down. It could be having a shower. It could be gratitude. And it could be, if we were to be really honest, picking up our phone and, going through Instagram, or eating a piece of chocolate, or having a drink, or smoking a cigarette, or, whatever. Those are designed to give us shifts in our state, and really quickly. Like I can definitely share that I've experienced being in a really difficult mental state and having like one glass of wine and being like, oh, I feel so much better. And when I share with people this concept of creating a resilience toolbox or a serenity toolbox or a self-care toolbox or a self-awareness toolbox, like whatever language resonates for you, I do tell you can keep wine in there and you can keep your Instagram account in there. Like if that's something that really works and you can produce a new state as a result of that, then great, keep it there. But explore what else could be in there, like a walk, like some deep breathing, like phoning a friend, like having a shower, like some of the things that we've already discussed today. So I think it's less about this perfect practice or this perfect mantra or meditation and more about what have you already experienced brings you home to yourself, provides you with a sense of more steadiness and sturdiness, and do more of that because your body has already given you the green light. It's already said, yes, that works. Do that. So find a way to do more of that. If it's walking, look at your schedule and figure out, well, how can I do more of that? Because something really good happens for me. Something gets rewired when I spend time doing that. Or, I really did have an amazing session with that therapist. How can I afford that? What changes would I need to make in my budget to be able to accommodate speaking to her or him twice a month instead of once a month? So yeah, I think it's turning inward and saying what works and how can I have more of that? What works and what is also nourishing to me? Because yeah, wine works, but it's got strings attached. So we want to find some more nourishing practices.
Yes, definitely. There's a lot of times that I share with people how we can use, as you were saying, what we already know, what we already do. There's a lot of times a really kind of like an entry barrier for a lot of these things. That is that most people are full in their days, in their schedules, and they don't want to add more stuff into them. And one of the things is, okay, how can we use what you're already doing? How can we create more presence and be more connected and more aware in your already experience, instead of saying you need to add this like 5 hours a week on meditation, 5 hours a week on yoga, and it's like, okay, like for someone that works, awesome, but at the same time, what you're doing, changing how you're doing it, what's the intention behind it. And I think that's really important. And I want to ask you one last question before we need to wrap this up, and that is perhaps a big one. What is the one thing that you wish everyone in the world knew?
Just that they're enough. Whatever they're doing, whatever they're wanting to be, whatever cards got dealt, like there's nowhere to get. There's a perception that there's like this perfect life and this perfect type of person that we should be shooting for. And certainly people who make a lot of money off of products are really clear about what that looks like and what that should be. But if we were to grow up completely in like oblivious to this idea of perfection, we would feel so much more connected to ourselves and to each other. And so I just think to just start every day with your hand on your heart and just say, I am enough. And to believe that and to actually live like that were true, I feel like that would just be life-changing.
It's so beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. And I would love to keep on having more and deeper conversation with you. Perhaps we can do this another time. But for now, where can people find you or connect with you if they resonate with what you have been sharing?
Well, my website, KristenManieri.com, I've got my podcast there and my blog and my books that I've just published this year. But there's a free daily centering practice course there. And it's really just something that I offer to help people figure out how to find some space in the day to do their work, just to sit with themselves. So I really enjoy creating it because it's kind of like the where, the when, the how, the why of finding time to come back to yourself. So that's there. And you just have to put in your email address and you get these videos and audios and things like that. So yeah, you can find me at KristenManieri.com.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. We will have that in the show notes as well,
Awesome.
so that it's easier for everyone to share it and to access it. For now, Kristen, thank you so much for taking the time, for sharing with us, and for what you're doing to help this conscious living, and for yourself and for the people that are around you and that work with you. For everyone listening, I would love to know what resonated with you. What did you learn? Are you already doing some of these things? And if you do have something to share, please put it in the comments wherever you see this. But for now, thank you, Kristen, once again. And we'll see you everyone in the next episode. Bye.
What did you like the most about this episode? Take a moment to think about what change you can make in your life today.
Share your conscious action on social media using #ConsciousAction and tagging @ConsciousActionNZ so we can celebrate your impact on the world and create a ripple effect.
One easy action we would love for you to take right now is to share, like, and subscribe to this podcast. This will help us get these messages out into the world and inspire more people to take conscious action in their own lives, contributing to the better world we hope for.